Maria Davis, a goal-setting coach that has been helping students and teachers achieve their goals for years, and I'm here to help you do the same. I believe life isn't about chasing after what you want. It's about accessing the unique power that's already inside of you so you can step into the life of your wildest dreams. If you're looking to do life differently, live a life that's designed just for you, make your dreams a reality, and ditch the hustle, then you're in the right place. My goal for this podcast is to give you tools, resources, and tips to discover who you are at your most authentic level, help you get back in the driver's seat of your life, and send you love and encouragement along the way. Welcome to It's the Audacity for Me. Hey, welcome back to It's the Audacity for Me. I am your host, Ria Davis, and this week we are going to talk about who are you? Who are you? Having the audacity to figure out who you are and what your purpose is and what it is that you're passionate about and what it is that you want to pursue. So this week's episode is going to be a little short, I anticipate, but I don't know, I might go down a few rabbit trails, so we will see. But my goal is to keep this episode really short and just really actionable and give you some ideas and some questions that you can ask yourself to really dig down and figure out who it is that you are and what it is that you value and what you believe, and really help you figure out what your path looks like, where your journey might take you. So I am so excited. I hope you are too. Let's go ahead and get started. Hey there, I am so excited for this week's episode for a couple of reasons. So first of all, I am excited because I feel like a lot of us are walking around wondering who we are, what our purpose is, what we're passionate about. I think that at some point in life, we get to just this uncomfortableness because we're out of alignment with who we truly are and what society has said we are, if that makes sense. But I am also excited because it is June 2021, if you are listening to this when this episode comes out, which means it is Pride Month. So happy Pride Month to any and all that are celebrating. I wanted to just throw in a quick side note because I thought it was really cool how the timing worked out here. I have my episodes planned in advance, so I don't always have them recorded far in advance, but I go ahead and schedule kind of what I'm going to talk about and just have it ready. So when I scheduled this, I didn't realize that it was during the first week of Pride. However, I do think that this is a very fitting topic. A very fitting topic, because this episode is all about accepting and living in a way that is honoring who you truly are. So I'm just excited that the scheduling worked out the way it did here. And again, happy Pride Month. I also have another quick announcement before we dive into what I have planned this week. I have created a new Facebook group for you guys, and it is in the very beginning stages, so bear with me while I try to figure out the technical side of things. But I wanted to create a space for anyone who is on this journey of trying to live their life more audaciously, and just give a space where people can support each other and just have a fun place to hang out. So if you are interested in joining, please check out the link in the show notes. I will ask a couple of questions. Once you click the link in the show notes, it'll take you to Facebook and you can request to join. That's where you'll see those questions. And once you submit your request, we will get you in. So with that all being said, all that out of the way, let's dive into this week's episode. Who are you? It's a pretty loaded question, but I feel like it's one that we ask ourselves all the time, beginning back when we were in elementary school, definitely in middle school, but when we're trying to figure out where it is that we fit in the world. This is the point where we start to form ideas about the world around us, but also where we start to form ideas about who we are. So maybe growing up, you had people that always told you were so smart and you were one of the gifted students and all of this. Well, growing up, that's who you feel like you are. It's who people always told you you were. And this applies to, shyness or, even more negative qualities. whatever you were told growing up, it formed this layer of who you are, but not who you truly are. This is when societal conditioning really made us into who we are today. All of our experiences, our traumas, our values, our beliefs, even things like the foods, the colors, and the smells that we prefer. Our brains were developing and still are developing neural connections that created this version of ourselves and the way that we interact with the world around us. It's basically, I think it's really cool. It's a blueprint for how we live our lives, and it's physical stuff that goes on in your brain. And if that's something that you're interested in and you want to learn more about, then definitely check out the episode just before this one, episode 8, where I talk more about brain science and kind of how that influences who we are. And there's also a book linked in the show notes. That's another really good resource if you want to learn more about the brain science and all of that. But this week's episode, I want to focus on more how that impacts us, how those layers and that societal conditioning, how that can be kind of a negative thing. It can be a positive thing too. I mean, if you grew up thinking that, you are destined for greatness and your success is inevitable and all the affirmations and things that we tell ourselves now, if we grew up hearing all of that, then you might not feel out of alignment. But I think most people, because whether it was your parents or teachers, whoever, as these layers are building up, that's kind of part of them, right? It's not necessarily part of you. It could be, but not necessarily. So whenever these are out of alignment, it's where people start to wonder who they are and what their purpose is. And it might just be a general feeling of uneasiness, or it might be just something like you know one thing, but you feel another way. Or, you grew up thinking that you should be a doctor or a lawyer, and that's what you were told growing up, but that just doesn't feel like you. That's where this episode comes in. That's where asking questions to understand who you are and what you value, that's where that comes in, and just really getting to know yourself and separating yourself from those layers. So this is when people start to feel out of alignment, it's because there's parts of you that are still living in the past, parts of you that are still operating from places that don't serve you, parts of you that are operating in a certain way or interacting with the world in a certain way because that's what those layers say that you do. That's what those layers say that's who you are. And a lot of times when people have trauma, you can see this kind of reenacted throughout their life in cycles because it's what's familiar. So until you get to know, the root of those problems and understand the cycle and actively work to fix it, you'll just keep repeating that same thing over and over again. And that's because that's what's familiar. So without getting to know yourself and really taking the time to define what matters to you, not only would you be missing out or are you missing out on an amazing life, but you're also going to have trouble making decisions, sticking to habits and routines, and having the life you want because you're busy with somebody else's ideals that weren't necessarily built into you when you were born. So a good example of this, having trouble with making decisions. If you don't know who you really are, what you're really passionate about, what you really value, the decisions that you make are really heavily reliant on other people, and it kind of takes your control out of it. But understanding who you are, you're able to operate from this confident place because you have a foundation. You have kind of what your boundaries are. For lack of a better word, you know what your lane is, you know where your lane is and how to stay in it. So it's really important for everyone to do this work and figure out who it is that they are, because the impact to society as a whole is just insane, right? If we have teachers walking around that don't know who they are and they're carrying around all this trauma and baggage and, biases, that's going to impact their students. So not only is this something that you should definitely consider doing for yourself, but also for all of the people that are in your life. Knowing who you are can have a more positive impact on them. Or, it might show you the people in your life that maybe you don't need to be there if they're not in alignment with who you are. So, something to consider. We are going to take a quick little break and we're going to come back and talk about self-awareness and how to really figure these things out. So I will be back in just a sec. All right. So, understanding who you are has a lot to do with being self-aware, to be able to identify how you're feeling, what your current state is. Are you anxious? Are you happy? Are you sleepy? Are you hungry? All of that plays into how we interact with the world. So, first of all, making sure our basic needs are met, but developing self awareness to really understand what our problems is. I'm so sorry. I am tripping over my words today. To understand what our problems are and to understand how we have control over them and how we can solve them. So, one of the biggest problems with not knowing who you are is problems tend to feel unsolvable. And if you have problems that feel unsolvable, this is where you either have to fix it or you have to let it go. You have to boil everything down to internal versus external because, we all know we can't control other people. So, with that being said, you can't control other people's reactions either. For instance, you might bake someone a cake in hopes that it'll make them happy and excited and all of that, but you're not in their brain. So if you give them that cake and they don't react in the way that you want them to, then that's not on you either way. You can't control that reaction. And if you're doing things like that, like maybe you're making a cake for someone every day to get them to ask you out on a date, well, that's manipulation. You can't control how they're going to react. Of course, that's a nice thing to do, bake a cake for someone. But again, that after that cake leaves your hand, whatever the reaction is or whatever, happens from there, that's out of your hands. You can't control it. Just like you can't control the weather, right? You have to be able to control how you react to uncontrollable circumstances. So going back to the example of the cake, let's say that you were baking a cake for someone every single day in hopes that they'd ask you out on a date. You're dropping hints, you're giving them cake, whatever. Let's say their reaction is, "Hey, like you're really nice, but no thank you. I'm good." And you can either get super angry because you've spent all this time making all these cakes, or you can say, "Okay, well, that wasn't in my control anyway." And you can move on. So that is within your control, how you react, not how other people react in response to what you did. So that was just a little bit of a side note, but really understanding who you are is about being present, being mindful, and being able to reflect on your feelings, your emotions, your actions, all that. And Aristotle once said, "It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it." And I think that is really key here because this allows you to see other people's points of view without allowing it to disrupt your values. It allows you to see things from an unbiased point of view, and it allows you to see parts of you that are different than maybe what you're displaying to the world. So, I really encourage you though, whenever you are going through a difficult situation, ask yourself what your role was in it. And of course, there are things out of our control. There are traumatic things that happen to people. There are situations that you certainly, like I said, you can't control other people's actions. You can't control if, someone walks up to you on the street and does something horrible. It's not something that you can control. But you can try and put yourself in the other person's shoes and really see and understand their perspective. I'm saying that more for like minor things, not, really traumatic things, more just like a disagreement. But even in that traumatic example, you have control over what you do with that event. So maybe something traumatic did happen. You, like I said, don't have control over it actually happening to you. You don't have control over that person and all of that. But you can do a couple things with that, right? You can seek therapy or counseling if that's, the direction that you need to go. You can, talk to a friend. Like, there's things that you can do to make it more in your control as far as how you feel about it, and take control of how you're going to let it impact you. Um, but if something terribly traumatic happened, or, whatever, I highly recommend going to therapy, and that kind of thing. But for this show and these purposes, I'm talking more like low level, understanding their perspective, if maybe it's just something like you had an argument with somebody, or something like that. But that's where your values really come in. So, going back to the example of having like an argument with your friend, if you value inclusion and equality, you're going to have an easier time with handling situations, right? Because you're going to want to be inclusive. You're going to want to treat people equally. You're going to have an easier time with that than if you value violence or inequality. And if you have values like violence or inequality, this might not be the show for you. Again, I go back to, you might want to seek therapy. But these more negative values are focused on external things, and they're likely values because they're covering up an internal issue. So that goes back to that societal conditioning, right? Nobody is born having the value of violence, but they might grow up in a family where that is something that's valued, and that becomes part of their layers. So being able to be self-aware and seeing that, okay, maybe this isn't something that I want to, I don't want to value this anymore, or, whatever. So having that self-awareness and being able to reflect is what's going to really help you identify what your values are and live in alignment with those. And this also helps to being self-aware. It helps when I encounter people that have different values from my own, because we're all different. We all see the world differently. We all have different backgrounds. And knowing my own values and knowing that I do value inclusion and equality, it also kind of comes with valuing everyone else's perspective. So even if I don't agree with them, even if I think they're absolutely dead wrong and I couldn't disagree more, I still value their perspective, because even if I don't agree with it, it almost strengthens my value, because I'm able to kind of stand on my foundation and the values that I've built in order to interact. So I'm able to separate myself from their values and see it more from a bird's eye perspective and a more objective perspective, instead of wasting my energy with arguing and coming down to their level trying to defend my position, because you don't have to defend anything. You don't have to defend what you value. Just saying, you don't. I'm able to understand, though, that this is an impact of who they are. If someone has a differing opinion, I'm able to understand that that's who they are, and that's what society has told them that they are. And I don't have to entertain that. I don't have to subscribe to that. I can see it objectively and move on, which is super important for conserving your energy and, conserving your brain power to be able to pursue the things that you value. I'm actually going to have an episode coming up talking about taking responsibility for your life, and we're going to dive more into this. But for now, it's just important to understand that in order for you to take responsibility for your life and really own who you are, you have to know who you are. And in order to know who you are, you have to start with being self-aware and really defining all of those things that go into who you are. So, what I'm going to do, we're going to take another quick break. And when we come back, I want to give you some questions and some prompts and just some different things for defining your values and really reflecting and developing a confidence in who you are. I'll see you back in a second. Each episode, I want to give you guys actionable, practical tips, resources, hands-on things that you can do to take action on whatever we talked about for the week. So this week, when we talk about figuring out who you are, there's definitely some things that you can do to really define that. One thing that you can do is find where things seem like they're out of your control. A lot of times when we feel this like internal conflict or we just feel this like feeling, I don't have a better way of putting that. If somebody has a word to define that, I would love to hear it. But just that like that anxious, antsy feeling. It's not a good feeling. Um, Usually you feel that way when something's out of your control. I feel that way when I think about hunger, kids being hungry. That's sad and it makes me feel and it's out of my control in a way. I mean, but there's things that I can do to do my part and help out. So when things are outside of your control, you feel a little and then sometimes there's places where you're blaming something that's outside of your control, but it's really something within you. So let me give some examples to kind of pull this back together. If you're trying to lose weight and you keep coming up with reasons or excuses why you can't do something, that's blaming something external for your lack of motivation. So, maybe it's you want to lose weight, but you keep saying that, well, you don't like vegetables, you can't eat them, and you don't like to work out because your knees hurt, and you'll go to the gym maybe when you lose a little bit more weight and you look good in your workout clothes, or you can't count calories because that's too much. And I'm not saying that those excuses or those reasons aren't valid, because that's not my place, that's not my lane. I'm just saying that it's your job to reflect and identify if it is really something that's out of your control or it's something within your control, but you're choosing to blame something external. So whether you might kind of start reflecting, and this might get you thinking about some areas that maybe are a little more within your control than you had realized. That's not bad that you're realizing it, because now you can do something about it. Like we talked about just a second ago, you have to be self-aware. You have to know that this is happening. So, before you can begin to understand who you are, you first have to be able to identify your emotions, and this comes with being present. You have to know what you're feeling and name what you're feeling. So, practice naming your feelings and being present when you're sad, you're happy, you're mad, etc. Put down your phone, stop trying to distract yourself, and really identify what it is you're feeling. Then ask yourself why you're feeling that way. When you're defining your values, you should consider outside influences, things that might make you happy, or things that you might think would make you happy, like a big weight loss, some sort of material success, pleasure, just being happy all the time. These are all dependent on outside circumstances. You can strive to have these things, but when you don't achieve them, you can easily blame it on outside influences. Well, I'm not happy because it rained today, or I'm not receiving pleasure because this person wouldn't do that, whatever. Instead, focus on values that you have control over. And again, I want to go back to my example of equality. If you value equality, you don't have control over whether everyone in the world is treated equally. You don't have control over other people's actions, but you have control over your own. And you can let that value shine in your life and treat people equally and, all of that. You have the ability also to speak out when others aren't being treated equally. You can stand up for your values. So, just a side note, identify, or I'm sorry, not a side note, really, identify what you have control over, and find ways to have control over situations that directly impact your life. So that's my little spiel on that. Some other things that you can do to help figure out who you are, what your purpose is, things like that. If you want to find your purpose, ask yourself, where do my passions and my skills intersect? To find your passions, what lights you up? What do you enjoy doing? What do you just love to do? Make a list. Make a list of things you love to do, even if you're not good at them. Just make a list, because that's still important. If you love to do something, it's important. And then if you're trying to find your skills, what are you good at? Are you good at typing? Are you good at gardening? Are you good at running? Whatever. Some of these skills might not be super practical in finding your purpose. I was really, really good in high school at I think it's called cup stacking, where you take cups and you stack them. It's pretty self-explanatory. I was super good at that, and I actually really enjoyed it, but I don't plan on being a cup stacking champion or anything like that. So while I was kind of skilled at it and kind of passionate about it, that wasn't my passion. So these all kind of intersect. As you can see, your values, of course, are going to influence what you're passionate about, what your skills are, because that's kind of where you're focusing your energy. So defining your values are super important as well. And this might sound pretty obvious, but to find your values, ask yourself, what do I value? But it's really important to follow up with why. I feel like if you remember nothing else from this episode, asking yourself why is one of the most basic, fundamental, and important things that you can do to massively improve your life. So when you're scrolling through social media, reflect on why you like certain posts or why you interact with certain creators or, why you like certain foods maybe. Is it because that's what your grandma always made when you went over her house and things like that? When you're looking in the mirror and you're staring at yourself, telling yourself mean things, ask yourself why you feel that way. Do you feel that way because you genuinely just hate your body? Because the thing about it is, do you hate your body because you look at social media posts all day of people that you want to look like? What is it that makes you feel that way? And why do you want to look that way? Is it because of how you truly feel, or is it because that's how society has conditioned you to feel? So that is a lot to reflect on. I'm going to leave y'all with that. But quick reminder about the Facebook group. Again, happy Pride Month, and definitely check us out on Instagram. If there was something that stood out to you from this episode, if something helped you from this episode, please let me know. Leave a rating, a review. That's how people find this content and how I'm able to spread this to more people. So definitely review, follow, all the things. And let me know if there's something that stood out to you from this episode. I hope that you have a magical, magical day, and I will see you next week. Bye. Thank you so much for pressing play today. If today's chat inspired the audacity in you, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And be sure to leave a rating and review on iTunes to spread the love and help more people find the show. If you aren't already, be sure to follow me on social media so we can connect. Just choose your preferred platform. My links are all down below. Have a beautiful day, friends.